The sun had not yet risen when Drogon outpaced the morning, his shadow a scorched lance across the indigo sea. Ash clung to the contours of his onyx scales, catching the faint moonlight like remnants of a funeral pyre. Clutched beneath his talons was the stark, silent figure of Daenerys Targaryen, her silver-gold hair matted with soot, her limbs limp as a banner after battle. The night wind that whistled around Drogon's colossal wings seemed to howl with a grief that belonged to no creature of flesh. He was a dirge older than men, older than dragons, older than the forsaken continent toward which he flew. Yet in the vault of the dragon's obsidian heart, grief and resolve forged one purpose. He would not let her be lost to the cold clay of the world. Every beat of those vast wings tore against the destiny that men thought unassailable, and every breath of smoke that bled from his nostrils whispered the same command: live. Hours bled into hours, and the sea beneath him grew darker, as though the abyss itself rose to meet him. In the distance, burning plumes of vapor marked vents where the earth's mantle cracked, a scattered procession of torches guiding him to lands once whispered of in children's frightful tales. Old Valyria surfaced from the horizon like a leviathan's spine, jagged and steaming, its ruined towers jutting skyward, frozen in the very moment the doom had crushed their builders. Volcanic fires burned in the calderas, staining the low clouds a bruised crimson, while molten rivers wound through obsidian troughs, giving off a lurid glow that pulsed in time with the dying heartbeat of an empire. Drogon descended in a spiral, the sweep of his wings stirring cyclones of sulphurous mist. He landed upon a fractured plaza, its paving stones marbled with veins of fused glass. Great colonnades, halfway crumbled, but still stubbornly upright, stood like petrified titans around him. Where once scholars of the Freehold had uttered spells in flawless Valyrian, only silence greeted the dragon's arrival, save for the low hiss of magma sharpening its claws against stone in distant fissures. Drogon released his burden with a tenderness startling in so violent a beast. Daenerys' pale form lay cradled by broken marble, a queen wrapped in the quiet of death, starlight limning her cheekbones. He nudged her with the curve of his snout. Gray ash puffed from her cloak and drifted to the tiles. There was no answering flutter of breath, no flicker of eyelid. Drogon's pupils narrowed to slits. A rumble brewed in his chest, but he did not roar. Instead, he paced a semicircle around her, tail sweeping slag like a mourner tracing ritual lines into the dust. Then he turned toward the ruined arcades and slipped away, leaving her alone beneath a sky fretted with dying embers. Within the labyrinthine heart of Valyria's catacombs lay vaults sealed since the doom. Drogon traversed corridors of cracked basalt that reverberated with every footfall. In vaulted chambers etched with Ouroboros sigils and spiral runes, he found crystalline growths clinging to the walls, geodes of amethyst and ruby fed by subterranean heat. Their reflections gleamed in his midnight scales. Farther in, pools of glimmering liquid fire lapped at terraces of igneous rock. Drogon dipped a talon into one, and molten gold slithered along his claws before hardening to a glittering sheath. He snapped the obsidian crust free, letting fragments scatter like coins cast into a wishing well. The dragon gathered arcane relics without knowing their names. Shards of fused dragon glass, spindles of petrified wyvern bone, fragments of armor that had once been quenched in spell-forged flame. Each piece he ferried back to the plaza and laid around Daenerys in a widening circle, an altar wrought from the ruin of an age. When he finished, he settled opposite her with wings partially unfurled, breathing in rhythmic gusts as though stoking an unseen brazier. Night ceded to dawn, though the sun's first rays were a pale mockery in the blazing furnace of Valyria. Smoke halos encircled the ruined pillars. Embers drifted like restless fireflies. Daenerys remained motionless, but Drogon watched her with unwavering gold-flecked eyes. There were memories there, her laughter on the windswept ramparts of Dragonstone, the thrill of diving together over the Dothraki Sea, the hush of snowfall settling on her cloak beyond the wall. Grief would have shattered lesser minds, but a dragon's mind was flame and stone. It bent without breaking. Time unraveled. Drogon lifted his head and uttered a sonorous cry. The note resonated through the ruins, a deep, resonant chord that seemed to vibrate the very bones of the earth. In distant corridors, echoes answered. Not the voices of living dragons, but tremors that stirred dormant powers bound into the black foundation of this place. Pillars hummed. Dust floated free of archways and hung in trembling suspension. Beneath Daenerys, the marble tiles began to glow from some inner spark, patterns of light crawling like veins of phosphorescent blood. She did not stir. Yet the air above her chest shimmered, a distortion like heated glass. Drogon stepped closer, wings mantled for balance. He exhaled a plume of smoke so dense it draped around her in a gauzy shroud. When it thinned, a flickering silhouette perched upon her breast, a tiny ember, no larger than a firefly, pulsing in uneven cadence. Each pulse released faint whispers, rare words in High Valyrian, the speech of mages long dead, syllables that melted away before Drogon's mortal mind could seize their meaning. Far below the plaza, a fault line cracked. Gouts of steam hissed up through knapped pavement, carrying the smell of minerals and ancient rot. Drogon seemed neither startled nor alarmed. He lowered his head until the curved horn above his brow touched Daenerys' sternum. Then he breathed, not fire, but a slender thread of heat, barely brighter than candle flame. It drew a glowing sigil upon her skin, lines of soft red light, mapping the scarring wound left by a dagger once thrust between her ribs. The sword of betrayal had killed her. Now the mark of her dragon sought to unmake the deed. In the silent realm between life and death, Daenerys dreamed. The void around her was not black, but the deep violet found at the heart of a great ember, where heat hid in secret. She walked barefoot upon a causeway of ghost-pale stones that carried her above a sea of shimmering glass. Her reflection stalked her from below, yet it moved with a half-a-second delay, as though testing each step before daring to commit. Above, the sky churned with storm clouds veined in amethyst light, and voices drifted on the wind, syllables half-remembered, from lullabies spoken by mothers she never knew. Child of fire, the wind breathed, its timbre ringing with thousands of harmonized selves. Blood of the dragon, shall you pass beyond the door, or shall you claim the world undone? Memronder. She raised her head. In the distance towered 9 gates cut from living flame. Each gate bore a sigil, a 3-headed dragon, a lion crowned with a corrupt crown, a direwolf wrapped in frost, a weeping stag, a kraken coiled in brine, a sun pierced by a spear, a flayed man, a cluster of black grapes, a winged horse of silver. Some sigils shimmered, almost dissolving into memories. Others burned bright as if recently stoked with oil. She reached for the nearest, her own, the dragon, but her hand passed through. Its fire only licked her palm, leaving no burn and no comfort. Not yet, murmured a different voice, deep as an echo inside a cavern. She turned. At the end of the causeway, a titanic form rose, half emergent from the glass sea below. Its wings were vast membranes of living flame, its eyes twin furnaces. Drogon, yet not Drogon. A primordial shape, the very idea of dragon made incarnate. She felt no fear, only kinship. You do not belong here, she whispered. Her voice seemed a fragile reed against the creature's thunderous breath. No more than the sun belongs to twilight, the dragon answered. Its jaws did not move. The words boomed from everywhere and nowhere. Your exile is a wound upon the weave. Despair threatened to swamp her then, an emptiness so profound she thought it might swallow all hope. She remembered the moment of betrayal clearly, the blade, the gasped words, the look in Jon's eyes. She remembered the hush that fell across the roof of the world when her heart stilled. She remembered Drogon's roar. Of the rest, nothing. A fading dawn, a tilt into darkness, and now this place between breaths, where memory and dream coiled like smoke in still air. I am dead, she told the dragon. Death is a road, not a home, it answered. The causeway quaked beneath her feet. Jagged fractures lanced across the stones, and sparks leapt from the fissures, swirling up to hang in the sky like false stars. Then why do I walk it still? Because one still seeks you. She saw then, in the burnished mirror of the glass sea, her own body lying curled upon a bed of ruin, surrounded by relics and molten stone. Drogon, her Drogon, towered above, wings shielding her from ash-laden rain. Light flickered at her breast, the faint ember of a life newly fanned. She reached toward the image, her fingertips brushing the surface, and ripples radiated outward. A pulse answered from deep within her. Then another, slow but gathering strength. The dream realm trembled. The titanic dragon reared, spreading wings so wide they blotted out the gates of flame. "Awaken," it commanded, and the word cracked the sky. Purple lightning forked across the clouds, illuminating columns of fire that soared like pillars holding up the night. The gates flared, colors bleeding into one another until every sigil burned white. The glass sea shattered upward in a rain of molten shard. Wind howled, and the causeway disintegrated beneath her feet. She fell into the storm, but she was not afraid. The dragon's roar filled her ears, guiding her back along the thread of life. On the plaza, Drogon tasted ozone. The clouds above old Valyria were spiraling in unnatural gyres, orbiting a point directly above Daenerys. He braced his talons against the stone as concussive waves rolled off her body. The relics he had gathered began to vibrate, edges softening, shapes melting into pools of incandescent ore. A lance of pale fire shot from the sky, striking the center of her chest. Where it touched, skin melted, knitted, and healed in the blink of an eye. Her back arched. A gasp tore free from her throat, no longer a corpse but a soul returning from distance immeasurable. She collapsed again, but her breast now rose and fell, shallow yet undeniable. Drogon's gaze glittered. He gave a low, crooning hum, a sound heard only by hatchlings nuzzling into the warmth of a nest. Across the caldera, magma surged, spitting fountains that arced skyward before descending as fiery rain. Each droplet struck stone with a hiss, sending steam curling around them. Yet none touched Daenerys. Walls of heat bent away before reaching her, parted by some invisible sphere. Minutes passed, or hours. Time's meaning eroded in that place. When her eyes finally fluttered open, they were clouded, searching. She drew a breath as though inhaling for the first time, the simple act setting tremors through her limbs. Drogon leaned close. She lifted a trembling hand, fingertips brushing the scaled ridge between his nostrils. Recognition flared, and a tear, single, luminous, gathered at the corner of her eye, before sliding down the curve of her cheek. The plaza's glow diminished, leaving only the crimson light of surrounding lava flows. The relics lay scattered anew, their melted forms cooling to dull slag. Daenerys attempted to sit, but her muscles faltered. Drogon slid a forelimb low, offering his joint as a cradle. With what strength remained, she pulled herself upright against him, skin registering the rough heat of his scales. She looked about, taking in the towering ruins, the ashen sky, the rivers of fire. Confusion knit her brow. "Old Valyria," she rasped, the words tasting of dust. "Why here?" Drogon's only reply was a rumble profound enough to reverberate in her ribs. A note of homecoming, of destiny inexorably resumed. She lowered her gaze to the ground. The sigil traced upon her chest glowed faintly, a scar of ember. When she touched it, the warmth was sunrise itself. Memory flooded back, bright and jagged. King's Landing rendered unto cinders, the blade's cold kiss, the void. She flinched, but Drogon gave a gentle huff, and the nightmare retreated. Far off, deep within the volcanic maze, something answered Drogon's earlier cry, a hollow resonance, like a bell forged from living stone. It repeated, slow and ponderous, each toll drawing nearer. Daenerys' instincts prickled. In the distance, obsidian silhouettes uncoiled from ridge to ridge, sinuous shapes stretching pinions against the burning sky. Dragons, dozens, perhaps more, awakened from aeons of petrified slumber, lured by the impossible scent of living Valyrian blood. Daenerys held herself upright with one hand on Drogon. She felt fragile, an eggshell world balancing on the point of a dagger. Yet, she was alive, and everything alive burned with purpose. The approaching shapes circled the caldera in widening gyres, wary of the great black dragon who claimed the plaza. But curiosity and something older tugged them forward. Recognition of kinship. The wind shifted. On its current rode distant murmurs. Not the roar of beasts, but the scrape of armored feet, the distant clatter of metal. From the labyrinthine streets where molten rivers met the sea, flickers of torchlight glimmered. Too steady for fireflies, too disciplined for chance. Daenerys' heart slowed, listening. Drogon's head jerked, nostrils flaring. Not only dragons had stirred. Something else moved in the carcass of Valyria. Something tall as men, deliberate as soldiers. She turned to Drogon, forcing breath into words. "I need strength." Her voice cracked, but resolve lent its steel. "Find me food, water, and..." She paused, feeling the strange energy still dancing beneath her skin. "Time." Drogon hesitated, instinct battling obedience. At last he nudged her once. An oath of guardianship. Before launching skyward, his wings detonated columns of dust, sending spirals of ash swirling. High above, silhouettes scattered before him like frightened ravens fleeing a storm king. Daenerys remained beneath the ruined colonnades, alone but for the echoes of her own awakening. She flexed her fingers, turning her palms to watch how the faint ember scar glowed and dimmed. Each pulse was stronger than the last. Beyond the plaza's edge, molten streams lit the concourse in smeared gold, and statues half eroded by centuries stood sentinel, dragon lords forever captured in poses of imperious dominion. She wondered whether their dead gazes watched her return with envy or fear. A breeze swept down the avenue, stirring pennants of smoke. In its wake, she heard the low clank of metal again, nearer now. She pushed herself to standing, legs trembling. A spear of pain lanced her ribs, but she embraced it, proof that she did not dream. Each heartbeat felt like the forging of a new destiny. She tasted sulfur on the air and closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Fire and blood. They were her inheritance and her chain, her burden and her crown. When she opened her eyes, the crimson dawn had bled into a day like no other, and the corpse fires of Valyria burned anew in their crucibles. The approaching footfalls resolved into silhouettes emerging through the haze, figures armored in patterns she had once studied in Maester's tomes, their helms shaped like snarling worms, eyes lit by furnace glow. They halted upon seeing her, as though confronted by an apparition. One raised a gauntleted fist, the others knelt, blades striking the stone in unison. Daenerys stood tall, drawing the ragged remnants of her cloak about her shoulders, like royal regalia. Her voice was but a whisper, yet in the hush it carried weight equal to any decree. "Dracarys," she said, not as command, but as benediction, a prayer spoken to the waking world. Above, Drogon's roar answered, shaking the heavens. Shadows of other dragons wheeled behind him in iron-dark constellations, drawn irresistibly to the living ember at the heart of a dead empire. Daenerys Targaryen took her first true step forward on the scorched marble, and beneath that step, the stone did not crack. It sang, a note clear, fierce, and unbroken, promising that the story of fire had only just begun. Daenerys watched the armored figures, as one might study flames licking around half-spent kindling. Spellbound, wary, half-certain, a sudden gust would snuff them out or send them flaring wild. Their helms were shaped like narrow-jawed dragons, lacquered in volcanic black, and chased with red enamel that caught the furnace glow and smoldered. Beneath each visor shone a sliver of pale face, streaked with soot but strangely unweathered, eyes bright as molten silver. No banner fluttered above them, no sigil stitched on tarnished cloaks. They bore the mark of Valyria simply by breathing. It leaked out of them in every movement, patient as lava creeping beneath crusted stone. A single warrior rose from the kneel and unclasped the throat of his helm with spidery fingers. The visor lifted, exhaling a hiss of steam as cooler air rushed in. He was young, perhaps scarcely 20. His hair the antique shade of bleached ash, pupils ringed in the faint lilac hallmarked in the oldest tales. He bowed again, deeper this time, forehead brushing the chipped marble. "You carry the line," he said in High Valyrian. that tasted older than the Free City's dialect she had learned among Pantashi tutors. Blood of the conqueror, mirror of she who burned at Summerhall. We felt you cross the threshold between worlds. Bah. His voice trembled. Not with fear but with reverence so intense it seemed to crack the syllables on his tongue. It was the sound of a library aflame, knowledge desperate not to turn to cinder. Daenerys steadied herself against Drogon's absent forelimb, half anticipating her legs to betray her again. Yet an ember inside, the very wound which had killed her, throbbed like a heartbeat loaned from the moon. Each pulse unfurled warmth through her veins. She straightened, tilting her chin. "Who are you?" "Custodes Draconum," he answered. "The Keepers of Fire. We have endured in the shadow of the Doom for near 4 centuries, guarding what the world forgot until the Dragon of Prophecy returned." His gaze drifted to the smoldering scar upon her breast, awe-ward with something like terror. "We did not know the dragon would be of flesh and memory." Behind him more helms unlatched. Faces emerged, women and men, some scarcely older than children, others lined as time-scoured cliffs. All bore the amethyst eyes or pale hair of old Valyrian strains, though mingled occasionally with harsher angles, the result of centuries of intermarriage with sailors storm-wrecked on these poisonous shores. Daenerys counted perhaps 30 souls in all, yet sensed that for each set of eyes visible another watched from ruined arcades. Arrows knocked, and farther still, she felt watching dragons. A roar cleaved the sky, ancient and hungry. Drogon spiraled downward, clutching in his talons the gutted carcass of a giant salamander dredged from a magma river. He set it between the columns with a thud that rattled spears against stone and roused sparks from embers. His wings buffeted the custodes. Their cloaks billowed, yet none retreated. Instead they sank to one knee again, arms crossed over breastplates in the salute of silent vows. Drogon's golden eyes swept the gathering. Satisfied, he nudged the carcass to Daenerys' feet. Fresh blood steamed where it met the hot ground. Its odor was thick iron laced with brimstone. Hunger slammed into her like the lash of an unsullied whip. Survival triumphed over queasy memories of courtly manners. She dropped to her knees, tore a strip of sizzling flank free with trembling fingers, and devoured it while the custodes watched without blinking. The meat burned her tongue, but pain tasted like blessing. She swallowed mouthful after mouthful, the warmth coursing into emptiness until dizziness waned. At last she wiped a gore-streaked wrist across her lips and rose. Blood glistened on her chin. She let it dry there like war paint. "Your watch is ended," she told the kneeling warriors. "I am returned, and with me, the dawn of fire. Tell me your names." Then, the young leader bowed. "I am Sarathor of the 9th Blade, Commander Pro Tempore. After the fall of my father, my companions are the shards of many forgotten swords. Together we answer to the eternal compact sworn upon the night Valyria died, to shepherd the dragons who might yet wake, and to guard the crucible until the blood of the dragon came again." A stir at the plaza's edge drew her gaze. Dozens more figures emerged, some leading half-tamed drakes on iron chains, forged of fused dragon glass. The beasts were small as horses or large as war elephants, scales filmed in gray ash, wings clipped with rings to hinder flight. They hissed and snapped at everything, including each other, but cowed when Drogon turned his molten stare upon them. Daenerys' breath caught. Doom survivor dragons, stunted but alive. She stepped forward, palm uplifted, speaking softly in Valyrian. One crimson drake crept nearer, nostrils flaring, then butted her hand like a foal begging sugar. It had a broken horn and one milky eye, yet it rumbled, recognizing kin. She looked to Sarathor. "How?" "We gather eggs when vents open new chambers," he said. "Many fail. Those that hatch we tether and teach. But they are half-formed, poisoned by the same blight that scarred our land. Some years they do not grow. Some years they devour each other in frenzy. Yet they persist, and so do we." His voice dipped. "Until now, none answered the call of sky. We thought true flight had died with the conclave." She followed his gaze skyward. Black silhouettes circled in widening gyres around Drogon. They were stone-colored, muscles rope-thick, wings nicked from scraping against cliffside nests. She counted 7, then 9. Then more shapes emerged from scorched clouds, until even her dragon narrowed his wings defensively. Uncertain if they were friend or challenger. But there were no war cries. The newcomers wheeled slowly, as though drawing invisible runes across the heavens, then perched upon jagged spires, folding wings like pennons at half-mast. Drogon trumpeted. His voice rang off the caldera, echoed by those perched piers. A chorus ragged yet harmonic. The plaza vibrated under the resonance. In that unearthly music, Daenerys felt the answer to a riddle she had never known to ask. Why did dragons sleep after the doom? Because the song had no singer. Now it did. She turned a circle, surveying towers where molten light pooled in shattered windows like demon eyes. Once she had come here in vision, guided by a warlock's trick, but the city then had been lifeless. Now it pulsed, veins open and bleeding living fire. Rubble shifted as subterranean gases flexed. What else stirred in those lightless vaults? Lore insisted Valyria harbored secrets, not meant for mortal meddling, demon-forged steel, spellbound maps, archives of prophecies sealed by wildfire wards. She needed those secrets, for she bore not only the grief of her death, but memory of throne and Targaryen destiny undone by steel and fear. She could not return to Westeros as a corpse made walking. She must return tempered. Not a dragon queen merely, but something more vast and terrible, an echo of the empire that once bestrode the world. But first, she must live wholly. The ember wand pulsed, then flared. Pain speared into her sternum hot as forge tongs. She staggered. Sarathor darted forward, but halted when Drogon growled low. Daenerys steadied her breath, willing the pain to recede. Beneath her hand, the skin over the scar was smooth but fever-hot. Each pulse felt like a bell tolling inside bone. With every toll, she sensed something tugging from beyond. A tether linking her to the door she had slipped through. If she did not anchor herself fully to life soon, that door might reopen and drag her back into void. "I must bind this wound," she said. "Not with salve, but with sorcery equal to the rift that killed me." "Does Valyria still hold the memory forge?" Sarathor's lips parted in shock. The forge was sealed beneath Balerian's anvil when the twisting fault split. "No living keeper has descended into its chambers since my grandsire's grandsire." "Then we shall be the first," she replied. A murmur rippled through the custodes. Dread, thrill. Sarathor sheathed his sword, audible over heartbeats. "It is perilous Khaleesi of ash and dawn." Magma coursed through its galleries, spells warped into monstrosities. The last attempt cost 40 souls. "Dan, I paid my life already," she said, voice calm as still water. "The forge owes me rebirth." She turned to Drogon. "Guard this plaza. Let none approach but those I send. Teach your kin the sky. You are their sire now." The great black dragon dipped his head, brow horn nearly brushing her shoulder. Acknowledgement and oath forged in one gesture. She motioned Sarathor to lead. He signaled his vanguard, 10 of the steadiest warriors, while the remaining custodes formed outward cordons around the plaza. Torches were fetched, though light was hardly scarce. The very air glimmered with reflected magma. They set off along a boulevard flanked by collapsed loggias where skeletons of wyverns lay fused to girders. Ash puffs rose at every footfall. Daenerys forced her pace to match the warriors, though each step reverberated agony. She focused on sensory minutiae, the rasp of leather over chain, the acrid taste of brimstone that bit deeper than the mouth of any forge at Dragonstone. Above, cracked domes glowed cherry red, radiant from magma rivers just beneath. At length, the avenue fed into a rotunda carved directly into a volcanic buttress. A bronze door barred the entrance, overlaid with bas-reliefs of smiths and dragons, interwoven so cunningly the figures shared limbs, a testament to the old sorcerer art that blurred line between craftsman and creature. The door sagged from warped hinges, yet runes along its rim still throbbed faint orange. Sarathor raised one mailed fist, halting the party. The wards remain, he warned. Rune fires feed on soul heat. To breach them bare-handed is to burn one's essence to white ash. Daenerys closed her eyes. An instinct whispered that her wound might serve not as weakness, but as key. She stepped forward, ignoring the startled cries behind her. She set her scarred palm against the rune metal. Pain detonated, violent as a Drogon blaze, except instead of withdrawing, she pressed harder until her knees buckled. In the darkness under her eyelids, she felt the rune network as a lattice of locked gates, each expecting tribute in the coin of living flame. And her wound was living flame. She surrendered to it. The ember inside billowed outward, flooding her arm with molten ache that should have charred flesh to bone. But her skin merely shimmered, runes skating beneath the surface, like silver fish under ice. The bronze door sang, a keening note that pitched higher until it pierced beyond hearing. Light pulsed through the relief dragons' mouths. With a grinding sob, the metal parted along a hidden seam, folding inward like petals of a monstrous flower. A gust of breath, as hot as a kiln, blew from the aperture. The guardians recoiled. Daenerys walked through. The corridor beyond slanted downward steeply. Sides tiled in obsidian slats cut so precisely she saw her reflection in each. 30 shadow Daenerys descending around her. At backs the door's sides shut, locking out the world. Torches seemed redundant. The walls emitted muted crimson luminescence, beating in time with the rhythm of the city's vast underheart. After 100 paces, the corridor spat them into a cavern whose ceiling soared beyond sight. Chains thicker than ships' masts descended into a yawning gulf. Supporting platforms ringed with anvils the size of wagons. The air smelled of copper and lightning, and from somewhere below came the boom of surging magma striking cold water. An endless thunder. Sarathor spoke reverently. The memory forge where Dragonsteel knew its birth. Legend says every sword that ever drank king's blood remembers that taste and screams in echo down here. Daenerys heard it then. Faint cries like distant gulls. Yet layered in such multiplicity the sound became a susurrus tide. She tasted sorrow at the edges. Ghosts of blades that slew friends, of crowns claimed in gore. All that grief, captured in iron. But closer than sword ghosts was the need to staunch the rent in her soul. She stepped onto the nearest platform. It rocked minutely, suspended by chains that creaked. The anvils bore mosaic veins of glowing runes, each a trapdoor into untamed power. At their center yawned a basin lined with fused dragon glass. Within, molten metal, gold, copper, iron, steel, all swirled in lazy currents, like wines mixing in a chalice. She turned to Sarathor. "This pool will give shape to my wound." He bowed. "Command us." "Heat alone cannot reforge life," she said. "I need the last breath of a dragon." At that moment, as though summoned, a thunderclap reverberated overhead. Dust showered. A hole tore open in the vault, framed by teeth-like rubble. Drogon thrust his black head through, jaws wide. Steam curled from his lips. His eyes fixed on Daenerys. Challenge, query. She smiled, raising both arms in welcome. "Dracarys," she whispered. Flame erupted downward in a column white at the core, edged in hungry orange, splashing into the molten basin with explosive hiss. Metal slopped over the rim. She felt the heat wash her face, hot enough to flay. Yet it did not. The ember wound glowed blinding. A ribbon of light coiled from her breast, dipped into the molten pool, and drew forth a filament of living steel that hovered in air like a serpent shedding skin. It twisted, winding around her torso, weaving up her throat, spiraling an arm until it reached her wounded palm. There it fused into a gauntlet-like shape. Sleek, silver-white, alive with residual flame. Her knees folded. The gauntlet flared, then cooled, anchoring her heartbeat inside tempered alloy. She gasped, inhaling relief, so pure tears leaked unbidden. The doorway in her chest sealed. She felt the tether slacken, the voids pull receding beyond horizon. Drogon withdrew, satisfied, rubble cascading as the vault resealed behind him with a groan. Silence settled, broken by Sarathor's whisper. The dragon heart vambrace. It is spoken of only in fragments. She flexed fingers now sheathed in liquid-looking metal. Sparks traced runic seams. It ties me to life. And to fire, he murmured. Take courage, Sarathor. The world shall need artists of flame. They ascended to the surface at dusk, or what passed for dusk beneath perpetual furnace glow. In her absence, the plaza had transformed into something approaching order. Hearths of slagstone ringed with bronze had been erected. Minor dragons clustered near them, gnawing on flame-seared carcasses. Custodes drilled in loose formations, some dragging shards of marble to create rough ramparts. Atop pillar ruins, watchmen tracked distant horizons for sails or shadows. Daenerys emerged to cheers muted by awe. She raised her vambraced hand in salute. The gauntlet gleamed, and embers drifted upward like captured fireflies freed. A figure broke from the crowd, a girl no more than 10 summers, hair as white as snow newly fallen across Dragonstow's courtyards. She clutched a battered wooden doll in one hand, its painted face cracked. She approached Daenerys with shy boldness, extended the doll. "For you, Mother of Morning," she lisped in rough Valyrian. Tenderness pierced Daenerys' sternum more sharply than grief. She knelt, accepting the offering. "What is your name, little spark?" "Nyra." She opened the doll. Inside was a kernel of obsidian, carved into a dragon egg, no larger than a snail shell. Heat pulsed faintly within, the telltale sign of dormant life. Daenerys looked up at Sarathor in astonishment. "We gather such seeds," he explained. "Most remain stone." She carried that one always, praying it might stir. He gave Nyra a proud nod. Daenerys closed her fingers around the tiny egg. Warmth tingled. A notion bloomed. Hope coiled around an ache older than her death. Once she believed herself mother to the last dragons. Now she potentially mothered a legion unborn. She rose, voice carrying over the plaza, ringing off towers and broken domes. "Hear me, children of fire. For centuries the world declared Valyria dead, dragons a myth, our bloodline a whisper fading upon the wind. But we still breathe, and breath is flame. Gather every egg, every shard of forgotten steel. We will remake not only a kingdom but an age." A roar answered, human throats and draconic bellows merging into one forbidding anthem. Across the caldera distant dragons leapt from perches, soaring on thermals in frantic exultant arcs. Embers snowed down, gilding everything in auric dust. In that burning snowfall, Daenerys felt the future pivot, yet shadow accompanied every blaze. That night, as forge fires painted the plaza in harsh amber, Sarathor brought dire tidings. Spies perched on cliff steeples had sighted a galley anchored off a ruined port, whose wharves jutted into the smoking sea like ribs. The ship's flags were black, emblazoned not with sigil but with a single red hand surrounded by 8 pointed stars. "The Red Temple," Sarathor said, unease knotting his brow. "Followers of Arlor have scoured these coasts in recent moons, hunting rumors of prophecy. If they witnessed your resurrection, they will proclaim you Aezir Ahai returned, or seek to bend you to their flame." Daenerys remembered Melisandre's red eyes reflecting dragonstone fires, how the priestess had once pledged to follow her into night eternal. She remembered too the Iron Bank, Cersei's broken promises, the Maester's suspicion of living flame, how every ally wished to own her dream, not simply march beside it. "We welcome those who share the path," she said, "but we kneel to no temple. Let us greet their emissary at dawn. If they come with shackles masked as blessings, we shall break them." She dismissed him, yet lingered at the plaza's edge where heat shimmered upward in oily waves. Dragons wheeled overhead, dark on darker sky, strange constellations in constant flux. The tiny obsidian egg glowed against her palm. She pictured Westeros, a continent likely reeling from whispers that the Dragon Queen yet lived. Jon's face surfaced, eyes shadowed by impossible choice. She pushed the memory away, not in anger, but in deference to scars still raw. Behind her, Nyra dozed curled against a juvenile drake that had taken to guarding her like littermate. Custodes murmured lullabies in a tongue older than Old Valyrian, their voices threading through the dragon song, until the two became indistinguishable. Daenerys leaned into that harmony, letting it cradle her toward sleep. Yet dreams came slow. When they did, they carried her deep beneath the smoking sea, into catacombs carved from living coral where pale shapes drifted among blackened vaults. Half men, half shadow, eyes lit by blue sorrow. They watched her with hunger. That was not hunger, but longing to be remembered. She felt them whisper, "Fallen ones, do not wake us." She surfaced at dawn, breath ragged. The plaza bustled, forge fitters hammering talon-shaped greaves, handlers coaxing juvenile drakes to stretch wings in first leaps, dragon riders in training. The sight both thrilled and tightened her chest with worry. Dragons were not horses. If unready hands pressed them, ruin followed. She must teach them herself, as Drogon had taught her, by air, wind, and blood. Sarathor approached clad in half-polished plate etched with coiling worms. The galleys boats approached the anvil wharf. They bear only a small retinue. "Have our watchers guide them here," she said. An hour later the emissary stepped onto the plaza escorted by 2 custodes and a nervous drake kept at spear length. He was a tall, spare man in red and gold robes. Hair shaved, save for a single braid beaded with rubies. His lips curved into a serene smile when he saw Daenerys, but his eyes flicked to the vambrace, widening with recognition. "Breaker of chains," he intoned, bowing. "Flame of dawn, our Lord's light revealed your return in tongues of midnight fire across our black mirrors. I come to pledge the temple's 1,000 candles to your rising." "Candles yield gentle light," she said. "Yet I require torches fierce enough to burn injustice root and stem." "What price does your temple set upon its service?" "A shard of shadow driven from the world," he said, voice honey-sweet. "The great other stirs. Darkness leaks from the north beyond mortal reckoning. You alone are forged bright enough to bar the gate. Stand beneath our banners. Accept our blessing, and we shall march at your flank when your dragons reclaim the Iron Throne." Then twine. Blessing, she thought. Another word for branding. She scanned the emissary's retinue. Red brothers bearing man-catcher poles tipped with cold blue gem glass, implements meant to restrain and harness more than to honor. "I have passed through death," she said. "What boon can temple rites add?" "The Lord of Light returned you," the emissary insisted, tenor darkening. "Do not spurn the hand that raised you." Drogon landed behind her then, a world-shaking arrival that sent dust sheeting over the emissary's robes. He staggered, coughing. When he rose, he found the black dragon's jaws, a handspan from his face, breath curling like burning parchment. Daenerys stroked Drogon's jaw. "See how my God answers questions," she said softly. The emissary's composure wrinkled. "We are allies," he rasped, eyes watering. "We are fire," she corrected. "And fire knows no master." She nodded to Sarathor. "Escort our guests to their ship. Leave them unscathed so their tails fly farther than arrows." "No, Mimin?" As the Red Priest retreated, Daenerys exhaled, a frail thread of breath that vanished in wild heat. Politics waited even in ruin. She would navigate it again soon, barbs cloaked in silks, blades in smiles. Yet now she possessed new armor, not merely steel but truth etched into her flesh. Death could claim her, but fire would answer. Over the coming days, she traveled the 4 great quadrants of old Valyria astride Drogon, mapping vents and fissures, choosing roosts where juvenile dragons might hatch safely. She found natural amphitheaters, where obsidian walls funneled wind, perfect for early flight drills. She oversaw forging of lightweight saddles, recalling the harness burned to slag on Rhaegal's back. She named a council of 7 custodians, Sarathor foremost among them, and charged them with codifying every scrap of pre-doom knowledge surviving in half-crumbled libraries. Their scribes toiled by magma light, recording treatises on wildfire kinetics, language spells, and the lost science of Dragon Hauda Ballistai. Each night she slept beneath the broken vault of the stars, Drogon coiled around her like a living rampart, the tiny obsidian egg she kept wrapped at her breast. Strange warmth pulsing stronger each dawn. On the 7th night, a hairline crack traced its shell, emitting a chirp, small but defiant. She felt her heart echo that sound, a mother's answer. By then, half the minor dragons had graduated from ground hops to gliding. 2 even dared to follow Drogon in high thermals. She watched them stunt above ragged arcs of cloud, tears drying on her cheeks before they could fall. Yet whispers of her resurrection already crossed sea lanes borne by merchant captains, spurring legends that outpaced ravens. Some tales called her a demon queen crowned in obsidian flame. Others hailed her as the world's redeemer. Golden Company spies, Braavosi bankers, Carthene warlocks, all dispatched envoys or assassins, though which proved which often became clear only when suits of scale mail turned murderous in the dark. The custodes learned quickly. Valyria was a crucible, and steel tempered in its fires rang truer. They foiled blades dipped in basilisk blood, schemes masked as treaties. Each attempt tested Daenerys, for she could not rule a graveyard of conspirators. She sent survivors home with pockets jingling dragonsteel trinkets, tokens of goodwill layered over unspoken threat. Meanwhile, the wound scar on her chest metamorphosed. The red lines faded to silver, merging into veins of the vambrace until scar and steel were indistinguishable. When she willed it, faint tongues of flame danced across her knuckles, a conjuring requiring no Dracaries, only thought. Fire was hers as breath was. On the 30th night, after resurrection, a quake buckled half the abandoned merchant quarter into the sea, exposing catacombs carved with murals of crowned dragon lords binding moons from the sky. Magma floods threatened the hatchling pits. Daenerys led a bucket brigade of juvenile dragons who belched gouts of cold naphtha vapor to freeze the molten streams until rime crystals formed, an unorthodox strategy drawn from scrap vellum on volatile chemistry. They contained the breach, and in doing so she glimpsed partnership between mistress and beast that transcended centuries of lost technique. All these triumphs accumulated like wax layers on a candle, building to an unspoken question: when to sail, when to reveal rebirth to Westeros. Rumors undoubtedly already reached King's Landing. Who sat the throne now? Rumor, said Bran the Broken still reigned, but the small council had fractured since her death. Stormlands teetered. Dorne whispered revolt. The Reach smarted under Lannister debts. One dawn, as light filtered red through ash haze, she summoned her council within the colonnade of last scales. Maps, salvaged from seawater-buckled archives, lay weighted by daggers. Painted lines radiated from Valyria like veins from a heart. Supply routes to Volantis, Marine Korth, even the Summer Isles. Sarathor traced a path north by northwest. Volantis first, he argued. They worship fire there. They will bend knee quickly, offering ships and grain. Volantis is a tiger in a cage, Daenerys replied. Open its door and it might prowl farther than we wish. A young captain named Rhalenna countered. Astapor lies gutted since you freed it, my queen. Reclaiming it provides unsullied recruits and a staging port. Unsullied, earned freedom, Daenerys said. I will not ask them to chain themselves once more. Debate coiled like twin serpents until she quieted them with raised hand. The first step is neither conquest nor alliance. It is pilgrimage. I must revisit Dragonstone, the cradle of my grief and the launch of my flame. She felt Jon's shadow stir at the name, but she pressed on. From there we gauge the winds, west or east, crown or compass rose. Destiny will speak plainly upon those cliffs. The council acquiesced. Preparations whirred into motion. Repair of ancient Valyrian warships, their hulls pieced from black glasswood, impervious to rot. Stocking of dried lizard meat for dragonfare. Forging chain barding for juvenile drakes. Making first transocean flights. Before departure, Daenerys performed a rite unseen since freehold days. The weighing of scales. She stood barefoot upon an altar slab, while each custodes placed tokens of their lineage. Rings, blades, scroll fragments. Upon balancing pans opposite the weight of a single dragon scale, fresh shed by Drogon, the scale outweighed everything until Nyra stepped forward last. The girl laid the hatchling egg, now threaded with fissures, onto the lighter pan. The balance found level. Gasps fluttered like moths above a torch. Oaths sworn in that hush bound guardians to queen and dragon unborn, equal in burden. That night Neera's egg broke with a sound like a cymbal struck far away. A serpentine head, red as garnet, emerged, mewling. Drogon lowered his jaw to the hatchling, breathing gentle smoke to dry its damp scales. Daenerys named it Embershard. The baby crept up her vambrace, settled in the hollow of her shoulder, and fell asleep. Dawn of departure came harsh, winds whipping acrid ash into whirling devils. Yet the fleet held anchor, sails furled, dragons perched along yard arms and mastheads like stormbirds. Daenerys donned black leather reinforced with silver threads drawn from the memory forge. At her hip hung a longsword newly forged in the same basin. Dark Concord. Its blade rippled with iridescent bands that caught firelight in washes of violet. She climbed the gangplank of the flagship, Fury Reborn, once a treasure galleass for Valyrian archons. Custodes lined the rail, palms pressed to hearts. On the quarterdeck she unfurled a banner, a three-headed dragon argent on field of midnight scarlet, flames lapping the edges. Wind tore it open. Dragons above shrieked approval. Daenerys turned to the city's smoldering skyline. She felt its soul murmur in stone and cinder. "I will return," she promised. "Keep the forges hot." A horn bellowed. Cable splashed free, oars dipped. The fleet glided from the ruined harbor into the smoking sea whose waters churned with jealous steam. Dragons leapt from cliffside nests, wings catching morning updraft. Drogon led, Embershard clinging to his neck ridge, its squeals lost in boom of mighty wing beats. Daenerys stood at bow, ash in her hair like ghost crown. Ahead lay horizon uncertain as prophecy, but behind her the doom itself had failed to claim her. She placed a hand over the newly quiet scar and felt the vambrace thrum. Steady, sure. Somewhere across those waters, tales of her death still comforted or condemned countless hearts. Soon enough, they would face her living fire. But not yet. For now the sea exhaled steam clouds that swallowed the fleet like curtains drawing over stage, and the play of rebirth advanced into its next, slow-burning act. Gai. Wind sheared across the smoking sea in restless gusts, snapping the great scarlet sail of Fury Reborn, until seams groaned in protest. Brine mist drifted above the rolling swells, leaving palest crystals on iron fittings and turning every rope into a coarse silver braid beneath the morning sun. Daenerys stood at the prow, gloved fingers gripping the rail, watching waters so dark they seemed poured from the night sky. Steam ghosted upward where undersea vents exhaled their scalding breath, and at those points the ocean glimmered the color of heated glass. Drogon glided high above, vast wings pumping slow and sure, while half a dozen juvenile dragons, some mottled crimson, others green as old bronze, struggled in uneven rhythm behind him. At his shoulder clung Embershard, squeaking whenever spray lashed its tender snout. Drogon angled a wing, turning to shepherd a lagging greenling back into formation. The sky rang with draconic calls, an ever-shifting cadence of trumpets, roars, and hisses that settled into patterns of command more felt than understood. Deckhands paused their labors whenever a shadow swept overhead, then resumed, faces flushed with mingled dread and exultation. No man or woman aboard had ever seen this many dragons alive, nor even heard tell outside half-believed myths. Yet here they sailed beneath a living constellation, and every clang of hammer on nail, every grind of capstan to cable, reverberated with the promise of reshaped worlds. Daenerys closed her eyes. Salt wind teased her hair. Armor plates beneath leather warmed in the sun. Somewhere deep in her chest the steel scar throbbed in a steady, muted hum, attuned to the beat of Drogon's wings, the way a hearthstone keeps memory of the fire that birthed it. She inhaled slowly and tasted potential. New kingdoms, new alliances, new betrayals, all waiting like sprouted seeds beneath winter soil. Footfalls approached, soft but purposeful. She opened her eyes to find Sarathor at her side. He carried an ivory-handled telescope, engraved with twin serpents devouring each other's tails. The brass tube clicked as he collapsed it and offered a respectful nod. "Scouts report a storm forming 3 leagues west," he said. "Fast-moving, could overtake us by nightfall. Her gaze slid to the horizon. A bank of low clouds had begun to bruise the pale sky, purple at the roots, darkening as inner convulsions churn. Lightning flickered within, silent at this distance. "We ride its edge," she said after a moment. "Better to keep speed than wallow in its heart. Have the lesser dragons trained to fly leeward of the fleet. The wind shear will school them." Sarathor inclined his head and withdrew, shouting orders to officers. Sailors swarmed like ants beneath the acceleration of command. Shrouds tightened. Spars creaked as canvas was reefed. In the rigging, a young woman clung barefoot, her hair bleached as desert bone, fingers dancing deftly from knot to knot, despite the jostling vessel. She wore the leather jerkin and crimson sash of the Custodes Aerari, the newly formed order charged with aerial coordination between ships and dragons. Daenerys watched her work, marveling at how quickly order had risen from the chaos of exile. Each task now meshed with another like bronze cogs, turning a mammoth clock. She turned from the rail, letting her eyes roam the decks below. In the midships galley, cooks ladled stew of river eel and dried peppers into iron cauldrons, suspended over coal beds. Near the stern, smiths had rigged a makeshift forge from scavenged bricks and dragon-fired slag. Molten rivets glowed orange as they hammered nails for repair of sister vessels trailing astern. Every soul aboard possessed craft or calling, and though their tongues differed, Kiskari, Valyrian, Brevosi, Argot, they moved to a single rhythm now. A sharp cry split the air. Daenerys' head snapped toward the forecastle, where two deckhands wrestled a struggling prisoner in ragged red robes. The man's wrists were bound, dried blood crusted his split lip. He fought like a cornered weasel until the sailors slammed him against a bulkhead. One spat found him skulking by the forward ballast. The larger of the two told Sarathor, who strode from the quarterdeck. Priest of the Red God, stowed away on supply skiff, hid among barrels. Daenerys descended the steps, vambrace glinting. The prisoner's eyes were fever-bright, irises golden as candle flame, a trick of Aralor acolytes who dosed themselves with colored extracts. He ceased struggling when her boots scraped the plank, nostrils flaring like a hound catching scent of prey. "Dragon Mother reborn," he rasped, voice raw. "Azor Ahai returned from ash and snow. I bring warning, not blade." Sarathor planted a gauntleted fist against the priest's chest. "You bring trespass." Daenerys raised a staying hand. "Speak." The priest's gaze darted skyward at the circling shapes, awe mixing with terror. 2 nights passed, in fires aboard our vessel. I saw a sigil. 3 wolves of smoke, devouring a crown of thorns. The flames whispered, "Your foes gather." They muster fleets beneath banners of broken castles and 7-pointed stars. "Your doom sails from Gulltown and from Greenstone both. War returns before your dragons shed their maiden scales." A hush rippled along the rail. Daenerys studied the priest. Sweat beaded his brow despite cool wind. Madness or prophecy? In her life she had met both disguised as the other. "What would you have me do?" she asked quietly. "Kneel in the temple's light," he answered, "and let Aralor gird your heart against the darkness racing to meet you." She smiled then, not mocking but sorrowful. "Fire already guards my heart." She tapped the silver-marbled vambrace. "And it guards me from chains by any hand, divine or mortal." The priest's jaw clenched a moment, then sagged in resignation. "Then the long night will devour all, even dragons." He spat a clot of blood at her boots. Sarathor backhanded him. The priest crumpled, unconscious. "Shall I toss him overboard?" "No," Daenerys said. "Place him under guard with water and bread. If he truly sees my doom, let him see how I defy it." Sarathor bowed. The sailors dragged the limp figure below. Daenerys returned to the prow, thoughts churning. Wolves of smoke devouring a crown. Starks. Boltons. No. The Starks had no fleet strong enough to threaten. A crown of thorns. 7-pointed stars. The faith militant. Word of her resurrection could have reached Old Town, rousing zealots. But 3 wolves? She filed the riddle away, prophecy revealed itself only in hindsight. By dusk, storm clouds clawed half the sky. The sun sank copper behind boiling vapor. When its last rim vanished, the world turned the color of tempered steel. Wind slashed waves into white blades that scraped the hull in savage cadence. Smaller ships pitched violently, their masts cutting frantic parabolas against low cloud funnels. Drogon barked a command. Juvenile dragons descended to cling to gunwales and mastheads, folding wings tight, scales glittering wet. Embershard retreated beneath Daenerys' cloak, trembling against her collarbone. She pressed the hatchling close, whispering old Dothraki comfort words remembered from long ago nights in the Red Waste. Rain arrived as needles at first, then nails. Thunder boomed crosswise through cloud chambers. Lightning lanced down, gruesomely bright, revealing for heartbeats the full flotilla heaving like toys on a black cauldron. Yet in that brutal violence, Daenerys felt exhilaration surge. She had ridden storms astride Drogon before, but this was her fleet's trial by water, and survival would bond them in steel. She pushed through lashing sheets to the quarterdeck. Officers lashed themselves to rails. Sarathor met her, face slick, hair plastered to brow. "Rudders strained," he shouted above wind. "We must reduce sail or snap the mizzen." "Not yet," she called back, voice slicing between thunder. "Trust Drogon's path. He rides the convection. Hell guide the storm around us." As if on cue, Drogon roared overhead. Lightning etched his frame in jagged silver. He banked west, wings cupping wind like vast shields. The storm, as though recognizing its monarch, twisted. A massive spiral peeled eastward, opening a vein of calmer air above the flagship. One by one other dragons followed, some awkwardly, others with juvenile exuberance. Their wing beats carved corridors of low pressure. Rain slackened. The deck regained a fragile equilibrium. Sailors gaped, momentarily forgetting fear. They had seen dragons burn cities, but never tame sky. Morale soared like a spark caught in updraft. By midnight, the fleet sailed between towering cloud walls that glowed ghost white in repeated lightning. Yet the corridor remained eerily tranquil. Only distant booms and flickers reminded them death still howled a stone's throw away. Daenerys remained on deck until first gray hints of dawn bled behind them. The storm fell behind, its fury already fading into memory. Officers rotated watch. Sails were mended where torn. Wounded tended. Fewer than a dozen injured, no ships lost. Better than hope. As pink rim lit clouds, Drogon landed on the forecastle, knees buckling from long hours. His scales dripped rain. Embershard leapt from Daenerys' shoulder and scuttled along his wing, chirping reproach for abandonment. The great dragon huffed exhausted apology, nudging the hatchling gently. Daenerys laid a palm along Drogon's wet snout. "Well flown, my heart," she murmured. He closed one golden eye, content. 3 uneventful days followed. Slack winds forced the fleet to row part-time. The muscles of free oarsmen bulged under sunburnt skin. Daenerys spent mornings training fledgling riders. They practiced commands shouted from deck to low-flying dragons, teaching the beasts to bank, climb, hover. One afternoon a greenling panicked, wings locking in spasm. It plunged toward the sea, riderless. Daenerys whistled shrill. Drogon folded and dropped like a mountain sliding from sky, catching the smaller beast in one taloned foot, hoisting it until muscle memory unlocked. The greenling skittered away humbled. Its near death etched a lesson deeper than drills. Trust the sky, but respect the abyss. On the fourth dawn, gulls circled high, screeching excitement. Ahead, jagged silhouettes broke the horizon. 3 islets tufted with hardscrabble grass and ringed by basalt cliffs, the color of night's last hour. Dragonstone's outliers. Daenerys gripped the rail, lungs suddenly tight. She had fled these waters on Drogon's back with madness humming in her veins. She returned healed but haunted by all that transpired in the interim. Scouts in swift skiffs pushed ahead. By noon they returned with reports. Dragonstone remained unoccupied save for a skeleton garrison of crown soldiers, understrength and poorly provisioned. The small council, still riven by factions, had left only token wardens to tend the ancient stronghold. Most crown resources fortified King's Landing under Sir Bronn of the Blackwater's stewardship, an ironic reward for his opportunism. Dragonstone, birthplace of her campaign, lay ripe for the taking. Daenerys summoned her council beneath a tar-stretched awning. Salt-stiff scrolls spread across a crate served as table. Waves thudded the hull rhythmically below. "We attack at dawn," she said. "No wildfire, no slaughter. Drum fear upon their gates, let the dragons break their will. Once surrendered, garrison will be offered choice: swear allegiance or depart." Sarathor eyed the map. "If we strike with only a fraction of dragons, 3 perhaps, it displays restraint, yet it must awe." She nodded. "Drogon, Skymaw, and Brightfang. They are strongest, best controlled. Juveniles will flank but hold flame unless ordered." Plan set. The council dispersed. Daenerys remained seated, gazing at Dragonstone's outline through flap of canvas. Memories flooded unbidden. Nights conferring with Tyrion, mornings poring over ravens with Varys, the din of smithies forging chains for the White Convey north, kisses shared beside roaring hearth with Jon, love fractured by destiny's jagged teeth. She almost felt his warmth again, then remembered steel parting her flesh. She exhaled long, steady, letting sorrow ebb. A flutter of wings broke reverie. Embershard landed on the crate, wobbling comically, hind claws slipping on parchment. The hatchling peered up with molten amber eyes, chirping. She smiled and scratched under its jaw ridge. Despite growing daily, it still fit snug within her 2 palms. Soon she must wean it from constant nearness, lest it become overbonded and unable to fend alone. Night fell. Dragonfire lanterns dotted yards, bathing deck in dance of shadows. Daenerys retired to her modest cabin beneath the poop deck, a space intended for a Valyrian admiral but stripped to austere essentials. Cot, chest, wash basin, iron ring set into bulkhead where a dragonling could roost. She unbuckled sword, leaned it against wall. Embershard curled in hammock slung from ceiling. She washed with cold water, wincing at bruises along ribs from yesterday's training dive. The scar vambrace shimmered faintly in lamplight, as if embers stirred under skin. She traced runic seams, reassuring herself it still bound her heart to life. Sleep claimed her quickly. Yet dreams breached. Great halls of ice where faceless wights marched. Swords of dusk-dark steel clutched in clammy hands. Red priests chanting as cities burned to cleanse imagined sin. Jon upon a cold throne of black glass, expression carved from granite sorrow. She woke before dawn, sweating despite chill draft, Embershard chirping anxiously from its hammock. She donned armor, strapped dark concord at hip, stepped onto deck. Breath plumed white, the sea shimmered silver under waning moon. Other captains gathered silently, wiping dew from breastplates. Above, dragons traced lazy circuits, sensing tension in mistress' stance. Drums deep as cavern hearts rumbled across water, or cadence for assault barges. Sarathor mounted steps to her side, helm under arm. Garrison torches spotted. They saw our lights, but not yet our banners. Surprise remains. She nodded. Signal Drogon. Moments later, a flare, an incandescent blossom launched from sling, arched skyward. It burst, painting clouds crimson. Drogon roared answer, wings casting cyclonic wash over fleet as he arrowed eastward. Skymaw, bright copper, and Brightfang, blue-scaled, followed. Barges slipped ropes, oars dipping silent. Dragons streaked ahead, weaving between curling sea mists. Daenerys boarded a launch with Sarathor and a dozen custodes. Sea spray stung like needles yet exhilarated. Ahead, Dragonstone's basalt ramparts reared, windows dim, towers finger-like against pale horizon. The castle seemed both guardian and prisoner of tide, its causeway slick with algae, gates rust-flecked. Only watchfires at 2 parapets indicated life. Above, Drogon circled once, then stooped in controlled dive. His roar shattered night stillness, the impact wave rattling battlements. Soldiers on wall craned necks, some stumbled back, lances clattering. Drogon released a roar, flame withheld, but its rumble shook mortared joints. Skymaw and Brightfang traced loops around towers, wingtips shearing pennants. Stone cracked where talons scraped. By the time Daenerys' barge beached on black sand, horns within castle bleated uncertain alarm. She disembarked, sword sheathed, hands visible. Custodes fanned behind. Smoke from dragon breath, released in showy bursts, not lethal, drifted over turrets. At the gatehouse, 3 trembling guards planted spears, yet made no aggressive move. Their mail mismatched, cheeks sallow. One swallowed. By order of King Bran, this fortress belongs to its rightful heir, Daenerys cut in, voice carrying over surf and distant dragon shrieks. Open your gates. None shall be harmed. Their eyes widened as recognition melted disbelief. One dropped spear. Others followed in rapid clatter. Cries echoed behind portcullis. Queen returned. Dragon Queen lives. Chains rattled. Portcullis lifted. Daenerys strode through shadowed tunnel into courtyard where perhaps 30 soldiers stood half-armored. Some knelt at once. Others hesitated, shame on faces at once forgotten vows to another crown. She halted before them, Embershard perched upon her shoulder, wings mantled. You see I breathe, she said, calm as still hearth. You need not fear flame unless you raise steel. Swear fealty anew, keep your posts, or leave unharmed, your choice. They filed forward to kneel, one by one, knuckles whitening on sword pommels, laid across palms in token surrender. She accepted their oaths, voice unwavering, but inside her chest relief beat like a raptor freed from coop. As dawn's first rays speared between towers, dragons settled on ridgebacks, curling tails around merlons. Their breath warmed chill courtyard, steam swirling. Custodes spread through corridors, securing stores, checking for traps. A horn sounded thrice. Signal for all clear. Daenerys climbed the steep exterior stair spiraling around tower spine to the stone drum's viewing platform. From that height, she saw her fleet anchoring in the natural harbor, masts bristling like reed forest. Smoke curled from galleys where breakfast simmered. The sea smoldered rose gold under sunrise. For a moment, peace draped her shoulders. Then motion on horizon snagged her gaze. A line of sails, faint but numerous, crept from the south, hulls low and sleek, warships, not trade cogs. Their banners, though tiny, bore colors of deep indigo and pale Ouroboros, Quarthine, and interspersed among them, black galleys sporting spiked rams, Myrish cell-sail designs, perhaps 24, escorted by 3 hulking Dromans flying tattered, red 7-pointed stars repainted over previous livery. Faith militant allies, or opportunists cloaked in piety. Daenerys' lips thinned. The Red Priest had spoken truth. Foes converged, yet fleet anchored secure, dragons perched fresh. She lifted an arm. Drogon's head snapped toward her. Even from this distance, she felt his query vibrate through stone. Soon, she whispered. Let them approach. Sarathor ascended behind her, breathing hard. He followed her gaze, cursed softly. They ride the current swift. Midday at most. Rouse the fleet, but do nothing rash, she said. Signal war, posture 2. Dragons to stand ready but hold flame under wing. He saluted, descending at speed. Bells clanged through castle. Sailors scrambled to masts. Dragons lifted heads, neck frills rising. Daenerys remained at parapet, Embershard chirping nervously, tiny claws grazing her collar. She stroked its nascent spine ridge. We have come home, she told the hatchling. Let them see how fire wears the face of mercy, and how mercy hardens when struck. The foreign armada closed as sun climbed. Watching from the stone drum, Daenerys noted discipline formation. Dromans leading, lighter galleys fanning wide to encircle harbor mouth, leaving no escape but skerries cluttered with shoals. Quarthine elegance offset Myrish brutality. Plated prows carved into screaming sirens tipped with iron spikes. Signal flags fluttered. A single longboat detached from flagship, rowing for shore under white banner stitched with Eye of Korth superimposed on 7-pointed star. Diplomats and zealots, strange bedfellows. Daenerys ordered a sally team meet them on beach. She took neither armor nor sword, only the steel vambrace and embuscade settled within hood like ember-eyed kitten. Custodes' flankers carried staves rather than spears. Sculpted basalt pillars flanked the tide line where she halted, arms folded. The longboat ground onto pebbles. 2 men stepped out. First wore Carthene finery. Voluminous indigo silk, gilded mask representing serene maiden. The other bore sparse black robes. 7 rubies forming starburst over breast. High Septon emissary, perhaps, though young for such rank. They bowed stiffly. Masked envoy's voice chimed musical but cold. Daenerys Stormborn, I'm Harry Exo, Speaker of the 13. With me, Septon Maribald the Younger, voice of the faith. The masked face inclined. We bear offers of mutual fortune. Daenerys gestured. Then offer. Harry Exo produced vellum scroll. Karth recognizes your claim to Westeros on condition exclusive trade rights for spices and silks through all ports under your banner for 20 years. In return, our fleet suppresses piracy along your sea lanes, beginning with these waters. The faith militant lends blessing for your coronation, easing transition of lords. Still loyal may benefit. Septon Maribald folded hands. The crown of Westeros languishes under infirm rule. The Stormlands bleed bandits. The Reach starves under debt. The faith seeks sovereign strong yet righteous. Accept the star's guidance, swear to protect the holy sept once rebuilt, and we shall crown you under the mother's gaze. Mandaro. Daenerys listened, weighing each phrase. Exclusive trade. Strangling tariffs, faith, oversight. Chains gilded bright. She smiled. Your generosity stuns. Harry Exo bowed faintly. We aim only to help flame find rightful hearth. But hearths draw moths, she replied. And some moths carry knives. Her gaze shifted to the Septon. Tell me, does the faith now accept dragons as instruments of the 7? Maribald's jaw tightened. The maiden despises wanton death, yet the warrior blesses swords that serve justice. Dragons are not swords, she said softly. They are storms given blood. The Septon swallowed, but held her gaze. Then harnessed their fury for the righteous cause, your grace. She considered further show of courtesy, then decided truth served better. I reclaimed life not through star nor prayer, but sheer will. I have drowned in prophecy enough. I will consult no temple's ledger nor city's ledger book before acting to free a kingdom from rot. If Karth wishes favored ports, earn them in honest trade. If the faith desires peace, preach it where zealots sharpen axes. Embuscade hissed agreement. Harry Exo's mask tilted, unreadable. Then negotiations begin from distance, it seems. She spread arms. Distance need not breed war. Leave your fleets moored beyond Blackwater Rush until my throne is steadied. Then return, and we speak of markets. Maribald opened his mouth, but a thunderclap overhead silenced him. Drogon soaring low, wing beats hammering air, heat from his furnace belly pricking sweat upon all brows. The dragon's shadow devoured delegates and queen alike, then passed, revealing sky anew. Harry Exo's voice tightened. We shall confer with our principals. He gestured, boat shoved off. Daenerys watched them row away, embuscade purring triumph. Yet unease coiled. She sensed that armadas seldom sailed so far for dialogue alone. Hours later, scouts reported Myra's ships adjusting positions unmistakably for siege blockade. Carthene Dramans lingered behind, perhaps awaiting terms. She paced battlements, gloved fists tapped against vambrace. Options. Shatter blockade outright. Risky, costs hulls. Or hold while dragons harry supply lines until foreigners tire. But open threat to home waters so soon would embolden Westerosi factions wary of her return. Show of decisive power imperative. She summoned air captains. Tonight we fly. Drogon launched at dusk, flanked by 9 juvenile war-ready dragons. Daenerys rode bareheaded, silver hair whipping behind like comet tail. Embuscade remained behind, watched by Nyra. Moonless darkness cloaked their approach. Only phosphorescence of breaker crests betrayed sea surface below. They converged on largest Myrish ram galleon. At Daenerys' signal, Drogon loosed a cone of blue-white death that sliced mast at base, spiraling flaming timber into sea. Screams erupted. Juveniles took smaller galleys, spouting brief jets to ignite sails, herding flotilla into panic. Some crews hacked anchor chains, trying to flee. Others leapt over rails into boiling black. Daenerys directed strikes with outstretched arm, her vambrace pulsing each command like beacon. Where once she shouted Dracarys, now thought sufficed. Drogon felt desire through steel scar link. Fire became scalpel, not hammer, precise to incapacitate without wholesale massacre. Burning sails drifted skyward like funeral lanterns. Within quarter hour, blockade broken. Surviving vessels scattered south under tattered cloth. Quathine Dramans maintained distance, watching Inferno swallow Myrish debris. Daenerys left them untouched. Message etched in night blaze. Bargain in earnest or burn. She returned before dawn, dragons settling upon Dragonstow's ramparts slick with dew. Soldiers cheered, relief crystallizing into devotion. Yet she forbade revels. Bodies of drowned Myrish sailors washed ashore, and she ordered respectful burial trenches lit by dragonfire to cauterize plague threat. Mercy as visible as wrath. Weeks flowed. Dragonstone's courtyards rang with forge song again. Quathine emissaries reapproached, masks humble. They accepted fair trade accords, relinquishing exclusive clauses. Faith, delegates withdrew to Old Town, promising conclave to debate legitimacy but delaying condemnation. Rumor carried tale of Myrish defeat to free cities, causing cell sale rates to triple. Few captains bragged they could withstand dragons. Still, Westeros itself remained silent. Ravens sent to lords went unanswered or returned vague courtesies. King Bran's council issued no proclamation. Anxious fog settled over castles from Duskendale to Highgarden. Dragon Queen lived, but how would she come? With sword? With pardon? Fear thrummed. Daenerys held counsel. We cannot wait in harbor while rumor breeds dread. We must show land's heart our purpose. Rhaelena unfurled map. Roseby fields yield grain. Harrenhal lies sparsely manned. A swift strike feeds small folk, repair keeps, earn trust. Sarathor countered. Or risk attrition from guerrillas. Better seize a storm's end, symbolic, unassailable. Plant our standard upon cliff of Baratheon might. Debate churned. Daenerys listened, weighing. At its core, one truth. Westeros judged deeds, not claims. She needed act that illustrated new covenant of fire and mercy. Night found her again atop ramparts. Drogon sprawled like black cathedral behind. Ember shard now half the length of her arm, perched beside. Amber eyes scanning scattered campfires of encamped fleet. Seaside endless lullaby. She spoke aloud, voice barely wind. I will not rain death on fatherless children again. Yet neither can I retreat. She placed hand on Drogon's brow. Images flickered. Tenderness of sunlit flight above Dothraki sea. Screams amid King's Landing's final hour. Her own blood pooling. She saw as he had seen. Mortal cruelty. Grandeur, regret. Tears traced cheeks. A rustle. Nira approached, holding clay tablet etched by novice scribes. For you, she whispered, old Valyrian saying. Under moonlight Daenerys read. Fire is hungry but remembers each hand that fed it. She smiled through tears, hugging the girl. And so must I. Decision crystallized. At dawn she convened council. Gaze resolute. We ride north to the Trident. There, where dragons last scorched innocence, we shall sow life instead. We will plant grain, heal towns gutted by wars, rebuild bridges. Let the realm see fire resurrect, not ruin. Mesnem shall. Sarathor hesitated, then thumped fist to heart. Others echoed. Plans redrawn. Fleet to sail up Blackwater, then coasting to Massey's Hook. Overland forces move along Roserad. Dragons escort supply barges. A mobile forge train would accompany, manned by custodes to repair infrastructure. It was audacious, slow, exposed, yet precisely the gesture vassals could not ignore. As sun climbed, horns sounded departure. Garrison left to hold Dragonstone while main host embarked. Embershard rode inside specially crafted nest behind Daenerys' saddle. Drogon vaulted skyward, leading procession of sails unfurling like petals across bay. From her aerial vantage she watched castle recede, lava-black towers shrinking. Ahead, continent unrolled, patchwork of emerald fields and silver rivers blurring under swift shadow. Somewhere beyond lay River Run, Winterfell, King's Landing, names heavy with memory. She inhaled, tasting promise and peril mingled as inseparable as smoke and flame. Beneath her, lines of supply wagons glittered like snakes of bronze. Custodes' banners snapped, red on black. Juvenile dragons soared in practice echelon, cries bright. A different dawn rose upon Westeros. One not kindled by conquest alone, but by the possibility that a dragon's heart resurrected could beat in service of realm, rather than dominion. Daenerys Targaryen narrowed eyes against rushing wind, steel scar pulsing in rhythm. The road would be long, and Ghost's future and past waited to test her. Yet embers already kindled in hearts unseen, eager to blaze. She urged Drogon faster, racing sunrise itself, and the sky opened wide as a new age unfolding. Okay. The columns of morning light speared slanted through awnings of pale cloud as Drogon's shadow raced the fleet across the mirror-bright waters of Massey's Hook. Gull cries braided with the hoarse bellows of deckhands heaving capstan chains, and each roll of the hull sent salt spray hissing against painted timbers. Daenerys tightened her knees against the saddle ridge, feeling the comforting abrasion of rough dragonhide under her calves. Beneath the beat of great wings, the world lay in scrollwork. Patchlets of autumn green divided by crenellated hedgerows, the toothy gleam of stone villages, and the thin pewter ribbon of the Rosewad running north, until it vanished in haze. Dragons, 12 in all, 8 of fighting size, fanned behind her like sparks blown from a forge bellows, scales prismatic in sun glare. Juveniles wheeled nearer the ships, playful, skimming the water so closely wingtips sliced rooster tails of spray that glimmered for an instant before the sea swallowed them. At midday they made landfall where a bar of copper sand curved beneath a brambled headland. The tide was low, revealing ribs of an ancient wreck half fused to barnacled rock. Daenerys alighted beside it, dust swirling as Drogon's talons sent pebbles skittering. She slid to the ground, the faint ache of old wounds reminding her of mortality, then signaled her escort to begin unloading. Wagons trundled down plank ramps, axles groaning under kegs of barley seed and vats of dragon ash fertilizer, crushed pumice from Valyrian fissures rich in nitrates. When the last barrel thudded onto the sand, Sarathor rode up the beach at the head of 36 mounted custodes, each bearing a tri-headed dragon banner with the lower fin redyed green for renewal. He dismounted, helm tucked beneath his arm, and offered the day's report with the crisp precision of metal striking stone. The scouts had secured a chain of farmsteads stretching 6 leagues inland. No sign of crown forces, only bandit pickets that disbanded the instant shadow passed over them. The small folk, starved of news, were wary but not hostile. Daenerys listened, eyes on the horizon where thunderheads bruised the blue. Light glinted from the vambrace that bound her living heart. Each pulse of forge-born steel seemed to echo across her ribs in tiny adamantine knocks, like a smith reaffirming solder. She turned toward the dusty track that wound away from the beach, its verge already churned by wagon wheels, and set her jaw. "We go on," she said. They advanced at the measured pace of a novice orchestra finding rhythm. First the vanguard of custodes clearing the road, then the infantry line, former Dragonstone guards now arrayed in Valyrian scale corselets. After them came the supply carts, squeaking under chests of seed and bundles of cuttings from glasshouse orchards. Following, the healers, their carriages hung with votive candles that shivered in the breeze. Overhead, the dragons cast fleeting eclipses, and each passing shadow made the oxen low, nervously even as it made children in fields break from chores to cheer. They reached the first hamlet at dusk, a clutch of hovels crouched among stunted apple trees, whose leaves already mottled rust and gold. Smoke seeped from crooked stone chimneys, and in the settling gloom the glow of watchfires trembled like frightened eyes. Villagers gathered at doorways, pitchforks raised, though none dared advance when Drogon planted himself upon the ridge beyond, exhaling a leisurely gout of smoke that rolled over the orchard in perfumed rings. Daenerys rode forward alone, cloak snapping, ember shard perched bright upon her shoulder. She reined in before the largest cottage, its thatch patched with sailcloth, its lintel hand carved with a faded tulip, and dismounted slowly, palms open. The hush was broken only by the distant croon of juvenile dragons chasing nightjars above wheat stubble. An elder woman stepped out, back bowed as a winter-blown willow, yet eyes flinty. She studied the silver hair, the queenly bearing, the hatchling's ember glow, and her lip quivered between fear and disbelief. "We heard you were dead." Daenerys' reply was a single nod, neither confirming nor denying the impossible, only acknowledging the wound of rumor. She gestured behind, to wagons, now rolling into view. "These seeds are yours," she said in a voice low yet clear. "Plant them before the first frost and Drogon's fire will warm the soil. You'll have barley high as a man's chest by Maiden's Day." She glanced to Sarathor, who signaled the drovers. 2 barrels bounced down, hooped iron ringing. "And draft horses to pull your plows, if any still stand." A murmur rippled through the crowd as men looked to one another, doubt softening. Children pressed closer, eyes round at the sight of Embershard nibbling a lock of the queen's hair. The elder woman's shoulders sagged by inches, the slow earthquake of hope unearthing itself after seasons of famine. "And what price?" she asked, voice rough as mill grit. "For so lavish a mercy?" "Only this," Daenerys said, lifting her steel-clad forearm so the fading sun set runes aglow. "Remember who brought spring to this soil. And when your neighbors ask how the barley returned, tell them fire remembered your name." That night they camped beyond the orchard. Dragon fire pits lit the ring of tents. Sparks spiraled into a sky heavy with scent of harvest stubble and salt. Daenerys sat with healers while they mixed salves from valerian root and powdered dragonglass, medicines said to draw rot from wounds. She listened to their chants, snatches of Giscari, Valyrian, hushed common tongue, and thought how once she had been the student of old maesters who spoke of bloodlines, but not of healing. Drogon slept coiled near the tree line, tail thumping when dream prey eluded him. Embershard dozed in Daenerys' lap, tiny ribcage flickering orange with each breath. She traced its horn buds, and wondered how large it would be when they reached the trident proper. Big enough to hazard its first flame? Or still needing the shelter of her cloak? Rain arrived with dawn, silver needles that needled through canvas, pattering soft as lullabies on dragon scale. The road turned slick. Wagon wheels dug ruts, yet by mid-morning the column reached a rise overlooking the languid loop of the Blackwater Rush. A barge town huddled below, palisade walls of river-washed logs, leaning drunkenly inward as if sharing secrets. Smoke rose from a half-collapsed smithy. A church tower broken by some forgotten siege jutted like a rib from the marsh. Beyond, the river coiled west toward King's Landing, its waters bloated from autumn swelling, its surface stippled by rain into an infinite braille of sighs. Daenerys brought the host to a halt on the ridge. There she dismounted, squelch of mud under boots, and considered the shabby wooden wall. No banners flew, no horns challenged. Hunger gnawed. Sheep grazed inside the palisade, ribs showing through wool. She raised a hand, and the vanguard advanced at a walk. No arrows flew. When the custodes pushed open the gate, it creaked like an old man's bones. Within, the townsfolk knelt without command. Their septon, a stoop-shouldered man whose patched robe once had been scarlet, approached mutely, palms upturned. Daenerys saw sores on his wrists, likely from binding tight ropes to deter thieves. She pulled a strip of linen from her belt pouch, gave it to him, and watched tears slick his cheeks as though the cloth were a miracle. They set up a field kitchen in the church nave, where wind howled through missing stained glass. Soup from barley stockpots simmered in cauldrons as wide as wagon wheels, and the smell of garlic and marrow drew gaunt villagers to the threshold like moths to lanterns. Daenerys ladled the first bowl herself and handed it to a child whose eyes seemed too large for her face. The child's lips trembled. Her spoon clattered against the tin. Daenerys brushed a curl from the girl's forehead and whispered, "Eat." That afternoon, she walked the muddy lanes, counting empty cradles tucked under eaves, listening to stories of taxes, doubled by lordlings seeking coin for crown levies. She promised relief tribunals once she reached the Trident. Promises were feathers unless weighed by deed, yet she felt them settle heavy on her shoulders. Resolve steeled. She paced back to the ridge where Sarathor stood studying river bends through a glass. He lowered it at her approach. 3 columns ride north along the Rose Road, he reported. Banners of the crown. Oak ship on Goldfield beneath Bran's stag. Perhaps 200, no more. They escort wagons, likely tithe grain. He paused, searching her face. If we intercept, we can feed half the mid-trident till next reaping. She lifted her eyes to the veiled sun, felt thin warmth on her cheek. Intercept. The word tasted sour, redolent of raiding. Yet the small folk starved while Bran's ministers hoarded levy grain in storehouses. She remembered chained children in Meereen and Astapor, and the rich masters who sipped wine atop their walls while streets choked on dust. Justice took shapes as varied as masks. Sometimes sword, sometimes flame, sometimes a cart turned south instead of north. Send riders under white banner, she said. Offer barter, our dragon ash fertilizer for half their stores. If they refuse. She tilted her head to the cloud-swathed forms circling above. Sarathor's nod was grim, approving. That evening the envoys returned with news. The crown columns complied, eager to avoid draconic entanglement. Wagons rerouted, grain offloaded into Daenerys's new silos of wicker and hide. Carters rode away lighter, pockets jingling with compromise coin minted from Valyrian alloys cut with copper. When the riverfolk watched mountains of oats pour into their storehouses, cheers rolled through muddy lanes like surf against cliff. Yet triumph rang dull in Daenerys' heart that night. She paced her pavilion beneath a flickering oil lamp, reading scrawled tallies of how many mouths could be fed, how many days, and it felt like spitting into wildfire. Westeros was vast. Winter nuzzled its throat. Grain alone would not quell suspicion. Dragons alone would not till soil. Mercy alone would not quiet lords who sharpened daggers in dark feathered councils. She set the parchment aside and unrolled a red wax-sealed raven scroll delivered at dusk. The seal of the hand of the king, a crowned weirwood leaf. The message was written in Bran's precise yet distant script. We have dreamed your return. Come to King's Landing beneath truce of 7 nights. Bring 1 dragon only. Let us speak of peace, else war. Devour the living. Sign not with title, but with the sigil of a raven perched on broken chain. Below, in smaller hand, the signature of Sir Davos Seaworth. Acting hand. Daenerys crushed the scroll, paper snarling. Bran dreamed. Course he did. The last time she stood before him, she had been rings of ash, spiraling around Red Keep rubble. Could she trust those who let her die once to greet her resurrection with anything less than poison? Yet ignoring the summons risked painting her the rebel again. Refusal trumpeted by whisper networks, twisting rumor to fear. She inhaled, exhaled. A queen walked into lion dens, not because safe, but because necessary. She called Sarathor, Rhaelena, the healer Iliacia, and Nera to council. They sat cross-legged on woven rush mats, lantern between. She passed the letter. Rhaelena scowled. Trap, she said. Iliacia agreed, but added that parley might avert bloodshed, that would undo their planting. Nera, solemn, asked what would happen to Embershard if Queen were slain again. The hatchling, nestled in Nyra's shawl, peeped at its name. We weigh risk, Daenerys said. Voice soft, but iron-edged. A single dragon Brynden Rivers could fell. Bran may believe so. He would not risk the city to Drogon's fire again. Yet Bran is green seer. He may know paths unseen. I must read his eyes. Then let me ride a shadow, Sarathor proposed. Bright Fang and I will roost upon Blackwater Rush cliffs. Signal and flames answer. She considered, then nodded. Duo infiltration, small retinue, no fleet. A humility gesture. It would buy trust enough to step through gates. 3 days hence they sailed upriver in a single swift galley. Hull painted soot black, no insignia save a white flag. Drogon flew overhead at lazy height, but within blink he could stoop. Bright Fang and Sarathor ghosted high behind clouds. Rhaelena captained the galley. Iliacia oversaw medical chests as guise of diplomat gift. Nyra accompanied Embershard, whose presence soothed Daenerys more than chainmail. The sails of King's Landing appeared first, crisp stripes of Baratheon stag under winter sun, flanked by new banners seldom seen, a raven crowned with mossy antlers on white field. From the harbor, rebuilt piers jutted, their char peeled and recarved. The ruined gates, where Drogon's fire once poured, had been replaced by stout oak overlaid with riveted iron. No Sellsword armies ringed the hills, yet trebuchets peered from red keep parapets, like wary crows, ready to hurl boulders of apology or accusation. Westerosi smallfolk crowded rooftops, murmuring like surf at storm approach when Drogon's shadow crawled across slate. Some cried fear, others fell to knees or raised fists in defiance or prayer. A royal barge met them under Lion Gate Arch. Davos Seaworth himself stood aboard, sea-worn face gentled by cautious relief. He bowed as Daenerys stepped onto his deck, Nyra clutching her cloak. "Your Grace," he said, "it seems the gods are fond of second chances." "Or second reckonings," she replied. He looked older, the hair at temple snow white, lines around eyes deeper trenches. Yet conscience still burned behind them. They disembarked at the wharf, escorted by a double file of unsullied clad in blue and silver. Bran's personal guard now formed from freedmen who chose continued service. They saluted Daenerys with spear hammer on shield, respectful, not rejoicing. She marked unease in their posture. Every second man glanced skyward where Drogon circled. The climb to the Red Keep passed through streets rebuilt with a haste that smoothed rubble, but could not erase scorch marks forever etched into marble. Stone masons halted chisels, watching the procession. Fishwives crossed wrists in warding sign. Potboys on balconies whispered ghost stories reborn. Daenerys held her head high, but with each step memory clawed. Here a charred skeleton once huddled. Here a boy cried beneath fallen lintel. Here the bells rang pleading. She breathed, counting heartbeats, reminding herself she walked to forestall further ruin, not justify pass. They emerged on a courtyard terrace overlooking the sprawling city. There, beneath a gnarled heart tree, transplanted from North soil, sat Bran Stark, king of the Six Kingdoms, his chair of smooth carved weirwood roots gleaming moon-pale. The young king's face was unchanged, serene mask of time's witness, blue eyes calm as tarn water. Beside him stood Sansa Stark in austere gray velvet, and Tyrion Lannister, hair streaked with winter ash. Arya leaned against one pillar, half in shadow, expression unreadable. Jon Snow was nowhere. Davos announced titles. Bran inclined his head. Daenerys stopped 3 paces from his chair. Wind stirred the heart tree. Red leaves rustled like old letters broken from wax. Bran spoke first. "Your resurrection was foreseen, though its shape remained blurred until Drogon crossed the narrow sea bearing your body. You have returned not in wrath, yet not unchanged." Daenerys found her voice marble smooth. "I bear flame that rebuilt me. I come seeking justice in harvests, not thrones of melted steel." Sansa lifted a brow. "Yet your forces sow fields along the Roserat under banners unmistakably regal." "We sow for hungry," Daenerys said. She recounted wagons rerouted, barley planted, bandits subdued. She described dragon ash fertilizer and forge trains mending bridges. "I healed the wounds I once made." Tyrion nodded, lips pursed as if weighing the coin of those words. Bran's gaze drifted to Embershard peering from Nyra's hood. "Life from death," he murmured, cryptic. Silence stretched until Arya pushed off pillar, stepping forward, hand on dagger pommel. "And how do you answer those burned on the day King's Landing fell?" Daenerys met her gray eyes without flinch. "By ensuring children of those ashes never starve, never fear slavery, never cower under capricious lord's whim. Loss cannot be undone, only outweighed." Sansa's expression softened a fraction. Arya's remained steel. Bran's voice broke hush. I see two futures. One where dragon and realm prosper in uneasy accord, seeds blossoming. Another where storm uproots all, your flame, my roots, every shoot of hope. Choice hinges on trust. Trust begins with truth, Daenerys said. She forced her pulse steady, though steel scar thudded painfully. I will not seize Iron Throne again. Let Bran's reign stand. I ask only charter for a new protectorate. Trident Riverlands and Crown Lands administered jointly by my council and his for 10 years. Harvests doubled will feed North and Vale. Dragons bound by oaths of mercy patrol coasts. After 10 years, if grain stores and roads prove boon, provinces choose allegiance freely. Gasps stirred. Tyrion's eyes widened, calculating variables like coppers on tavern board. Sansa whispered to Bran. He listened, pupils widening as if glimpsing beyond present. Ambitious, Tyrion murmured. Some lords will balk. Daenerys lifted chin. Let them visit fields where fertile ash warms soil, then balk. Bran closed eyes. Wind rustled Hearttree again. Minutes ticked like dripping water from leaky roof. At last he opened them. I will grant provisional charter, 1-year probation. Your dragons shall not fly within a league of capital without leave, nor cross into Vale or North. In return, Crown provides carpenters and masons for your rebuilding. At year's end, council to reconvene. Sansa exhaled. Tension eased from shoulders. Arya's hand left dagger. Davos smiled faintly. Tyrion's gaze flicked between Bran and Daenerys as if awaiting someone to laugh. No one did. Daenerys inclined head. Silver hair spilling silk. Agreed. Yet Bran raised a hand. One caution. Prophecy may chase you still. Shadows stir north of Wall. Dead things uneasy. The long night ended, but frost remembers. Should you ride north unbidden, flame may meet ice too soon. I have no wish to wage war again, she answered. Though memory of White Walker's chill touched spine. Audience concluded with ceremonial ink pressed onto vellum. Bran's rune, Daenerys' sigil, Davos and Tyrion witness. During formalities, a hush fell. Arya sidled near Daenerys, voice low. He loved you once. The assassin's eyes flicked to distant corridor. The ghost of that love keeps him from chamber. Know that. Daenerys felt the old wound pulse. Jon, absent shadow. Words failed. Arya slipped away. They dined at dusk in smaller solar. No extravagance, only trencher bread, river trout, persimmon wine. Conversation parried safe territories. Harbor repairs, Dornish trade of pomegranates. Tyrion quipped about Carthene spices. Daenerys countered with jest on Selsale navies scorched to char. Laughter fluttered. Thin, but real. When candles burned low, Bran retired, parted with cryptic blessing. May your fire temper, not devour. Sansa escorted him. Davos followed. Tyrion lingered, swirling goblet, studying embers in hearth. I once believed in tyranny mathematics, he said, wry smile. Add dragons to grievance and result equaled cataclysm. Tonight you solve for mercy. I hope variables remain friendly. So do I, she replied. Embershard leapt to table, sniffing wine. Tyrion chuckled, scratched its chin. When that one grows horns, reminded dwarfs taste bitter. Night deepened. She bade farewell and departed with escort to Riverside Galley beneath lantern constellations. At dock, she paused, glancing up gate of the Gods Boulevard. Far end, a cloaked figure stood half in torch shadow. Broad-shouldered, hair tied. Her breath hitched. But the figure turned, melted into darkness, and when she called soft, wind snatched her voice. Back aboard, sails caught midnight breeze. Drogon and Brightfang shadowed. King's Landing receded, lanterns guttering. Nyra dozed against coil of rope. Embershard curled in her lap. Daenerys leaned against rail, watching moonlight scribble silver on waves. Heart heavy, yet horizons widened. Weeks rolled into months of ceaseless labor. Charter ratified, masons arrived, wagons of crown timber. Villages blooming across crownlands, sprouted communal granaries shaped like upturned dragon eggs, symbol of rebirth. Custodes drilled dragon riders from fisher sons and brewer daughters. Skymaw carried a one-armed baker who navigated by echo clicks. Brightfang bonded to a mute orphan who spoke in whistled modulations dragons seemed to fathom. Harvest festival at midwinter's fall-lit night with lanterns carved like flames. Children chanting Valyrian lullabies that spread like wildfire from hamlet to hamlet. Word reached Bravos. Ironbank offered line of credit at modest interest, scenting stability. Korth dispatched spice caravans, priests of Erlor among them studying dragonash fertilizer with almost ecclesiastic awe. But storms brewed. Lannister remnants rallied in Golden Tooth passes, claiming Bran's leniency proof of weakness. The faith militant seethed at seeing Crown endorse heathen queen. And in the north, ravens brought tidings of ice wraiths haunting Nightfort ruins. Livestock found drained of warmth. Snow fell heavier than in a decade, though calendar swore spring. One dawn, Daenerys stood atop rampart at Maidenpool, overseeing New Granary's thatch, when Drogon uttered a bellow raw enough to splinter calm. She turned to see Sarathor rushing across courtyard, cloak flaring. He knelt, fist to chest. A raven from Castle Black. The dead stir beyond shattered wall. Jon Snow rides south to seek audience. Her breath left body like bellows deflated. She closed eyes, felt Vambrace pulse. Fire and ice to meet again. On fields yet unseeded. In hearts still healing. She whispered only, "Prepare the hearths, and ready the dragons."